Pokemon Legends ZA is a difficult game to talk about. When the game was announced in February of 2024, people were so excited. Another Legends game! Many fans loved the previous Legends game, Pokemon Legends Arceus, for innovating on the series' formula with new mechanics, such as real-time catching and dodging. So, after the widespread disappointment with the broken and undercooked Pokemon Scarlet and Violet games, I think people were more than ready for a new game in this Legends subseries, and were excited for a new game that took place in the Kalos region from Pokemon X and Y. However, a lot of excitement turned to disappointment upon the news that the game would be taking place in Lumiose City, and only Lumiose City. You don't visit a single other part of the region in this game. But I was still hopeful that the game could be good. Maybe a smaller map would give them the chance to really flesh it out. After the game's release on October 16th, 2025, the game was received decently by critics, but the game was not received well by a lot of the internet. Most people just dismissed it as Pokemon's laziest cash grab yet. But I got it for Christmas, I beat it, and I'll be honest, I think there's a lot more to it than that. Also, before we get started, I'll be reviewing the Switch 2 version of the game. The game starts with an establishing shot of Prism Tower before someone, or something, jumps down to the ground. People in silhouette state that something is going wrong with the tower. AZ states that they need to find the strongest Mega Evolution user. I actually really like this. The camera angle and lighting really set up a sense of mystery. Who are these people, and are they responsible for what's happening to the city? Then the main character travels to the city, and that's where we take control. Now, I'll be honest, this game's intro sucks. It's so slow and boring, and the friends you make don't stop talking. Now, to be fair, you could argue that the last point happens throughout the whole game. This is one aspect of modern Pokemon that people really dislike, the constant chit-chat interrupting the gameplay. Personally, I didn't mind it too much because I actually like the characters in this game, but I can imagine the constant A button mashing through dialogue being a source of annoyance for many. I watched someone play this game online, and they got very annoyed by the constant need to go back to Hotel Z when the characters don't say much of importance, and while it personally didn't bother me, I was mostly just button mashing through the whole thing, I can imagine this will be a pace breaker for a lot of people, and it sort of feels like the game is just padding out time. The game also greatly limits where the player can go at first, and then gradually expands the radius the player has access to until they eventually have access to the whole city. Now, I don't mind this in concept. I think slowly acclimating players to an open environment in order to not overwhelm them is a good design choice. For example, Breath of the Wild. It starts with the Great Plateau before fully expanding into the open world map. But I think the execution here is a bit rough. Tawny not letting me explore any side paths and forcing me to trail behind her slowly was annoying. I get to my first battle, and guys, I am a huge fan of this new battle system. It's similar to the battle system from, say, Xenoblade Chronicles. The game is no longer fully turn-based. Upon locking on to an opposing Pokemon, your Pokemon's moves will be mapped to the 4 face buttons, which I think was a smart choice because it gives you immediate access to all of your moves, which is more important in this faster-paced battle system. Moves can be used without worrying about power points or whose turn it is, with the trade-off that moves will need to cool down before they can be used again. Depending on the attack, you can also potentially dodge attacks by leading your Pokemon away and or hiding behind terrain. All of this allows the battles to feel more like a spectacle and give players a glimpse into that dream of battling the way characters do in the anime. Another aspect of this new battle system is the ability to freely switch Pokemon. You can switch Pokemon nearly any time you'd like. However, to prevent this from being too overpowered, when your Pokemon is sent out, they will cry out for a second, giving the opponent a potential chance to attack. I do admit that a lot of the combat is juggling moves while you wait for the one you want to be cooled down, but I feel this adds to the strategy of choosing your moves, because you have to decide if you want another strong move that would take longer to cool down, or do you want a weaker move, allowing you to quickly get them with the 1-2 combo. It also makes moves like Protect a lot more important since they can cause you or your opponent's best attack to be out of commission for a bit. I also like the catching mechanics in this game, since they're mostly ripped directly from Legends Arceus. I kinda kept forgetting you could sneak up on Pokemon in this game, so I barely did it up until the end of the game. But yeah, you can still get an advantage by catching Pokemon from behind, which is satisfying and fun. You can no longer throw your Pokemon and its Pokeball at a wild Pokemon for a chance at a sneak attack, which is something I will kinda miss, but that's just because they changed the button placement for releasing Pokemon. They now just spawn in front of you instead of you manually throwing them out. A nice quality of life improvement is that in front of every Pokemon Center there is a man who will give you any Pokeballs that you threw and missed. Another nice improvement is that shiny hunting is a lot easier in this game than in Scarlet and Violet, due to the game having better visual and audio cues helping you detect if one is nearby. I do kinda miss some of the more interesting mechanics from Legends Arceus, such as being able to lure Pokemon and being able to use items like Wing Balls. Even the research goals are now more so just catch X amount of fire types or whatever, but I suppose these were simplified due to the game being less about catching and more so about battling. Honestly, I think that's kinda cool how both Legends games have so far focused on specific elements of Pokemon and putting a new twist on them. Legends Arceus had a new spin on catching, while Legends ZA has a new spin on battling. As the game progresses, we unlock more of the city and, well, this is the part of the game that is probably the most controversial aspect, the city. Now, I don't hate the city environment. I love Lumiose City in Pokemon X and Y. It's one of my favorite cities in all of Pokemon, and it's nice to be able to navigate it without having an aneurysm from trying to deal with the weird camera. But it does feel very restrictive. I was so excited to finally find a dungeon area in the game, but I also realized that was because I was getting kind of tired of just exploring the city. There isn't much variety in the city. Sometimes it rains or the sky is foggy and there's one snowy area, but overall most of it kinda looks the same. Honestly, there isn't much to explore. You're mainly just looking for items like colorful screws and TMs, as well as side quests. While yeah, my ADHD brain was going around collecting every shiny thing I could possibly find, there was no denying that exploring here wasn't nearly as fun as it was in games like the original X and Y. There were no hidden caves or secret routes or anything because it's all condensed into this one city. I think if they at least let you find more sections of the Lumiose sewers that weren't part of the main story, that would have made exploration a lot more fun. This game doesn't really feel like an adventure like past Pokemon games, instead it has more of a mission-based structure. While this isn't inherently a bad thing, it definitely sacrifices some of the appeal of the series to longtime fans. When exploring, you always have a map to look at, and you have a waypoint that shows where you need to go, but I feel like when I'm on foot, it's still easy to get lost, since there aren't many recognizable landmarks outside of the Prism Tower to give me a sense of direction. There's also not a lot to explore indoors. There are some enterable buildings, but honestly, the buildings were really underwhelming. I understand not having every single door being unlocked, but I at least think there should be a few more buildings unlocked. I also think that the buildings that are there don't have much to explore. The buildings are usually just one room each that are part of a main mission. Outside of exceptions like the Lumiose Museum, there isn't much to explore indoors, which is so disappointing considering exploring the interiors used to be such a fun part of exploring Pokemon cities in games like Black and White and even X and Y. A lot of people complain that you couldn't walk around in the clothes shops, but I personally found the menus more convenient considering the amount of them. Now, someone could argue that it's just filler to not have the clothes shops just be one store per area, but personally I found it fun to see what each store had to offer. It sorta gives you the feeling of shopping around the mall. The mini cafes, on the other hand, were completely pointless. They can heal your Pokemon, but I personally just preferred warping to the nearest Pokemon Center instead, since those are all free. They also raise friendship, but what's the point in having so many cafes if they all serve that same purpose? Why not have different cafes with different functions? Maybe the different drinks could act like the sandwiches from Scarlet and Violet, giving you temporary stat boosts depending on which drink you get. Speaking of food, this is a nitpick I suppose, but why do the berry sellers just have a list of berries without any explanation as to what each one does? Yeah, I can just Google it, but it's so inconvenient. Something I did like, however, was navigating the construction sites and rooftops. I enjoyed having a light platforming element in Pokemon, because I love platforming, and I loved the challenges where you have to navigate construction sites quickly. I also enjoyed unlocking more Holovators throughout the game, as it meant access to more rooftop areas. Later on, you unlock the Rotoglide, which introduces a whole new element, as it potentially allows you to cross construction sites or even whole buildings. Later in the game, there were certain quests that required me to really examine my environment to figure out a route to the rooftop I needed, and I really liked that. I mentioned the lack of surfing routes, and that's because there are no ride Pokemon in this game, and I felt really disappointed by this after Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet had really fun to use ride Pokemon. I guess they didn't want players to realize how small the map actually is, but at least give us the roller skates from X and Y. I think they could have at least had Surf to travel across waterways, which could have led to cool secrets, but no, nothing. I think bringing back the rideable Skiddo could have been a cool reward for beating the game at the very least. While they don't have ride Pokemon, they do have some form of field moves in a way that I think is really cool in concept. By targeting certain obstacles with your Pokemon and using specific moves, you can clear them out. For example, most Fire-type moves can turn a small sheet of ice into a pathway across water, and Ground or Fighting-type moves can help destroy rocks. Honestly, while I did enjoy Ride Pokemon, I feel they kinda undermined the feeling of using your actual Pokemon to help you through the overworld, like in previous games. So, I like the idea of your Pokemon using field moves. I think this is a great way of implementing them since unlike classic HMs, there are multiple moves that can be used per obstacle. Said moves can be changed out whenever, and if you don't have the right move currently, you always have your PC boxes with you. The only thing is, I think it loses its appeal a bit quickly. Not because it gets annoying or anything, I never had a problem with it functionally. Rather, I think they should have made it so that you unlock the ability to use field moves over time, like in the older games. For example, I wish as you progressed in the game, you unlock the ability to untangle webs or melt ice with fire-type moves. This way, it would feel more fun exploring previous areas with new abilities, which I think was a big part of the appeal of HMs in previous games, despite their shortcomings. The closest thing to HMs in this game would probably be the Rotoglide, as mentioned earlier. Tawny and the gang introduced the ZA Royale, a competition meant to find the ultimate Mega Evolution user. How this works is once it turns nighttime, a certain area in Lumiose City will turn into a battle zone. You then have to get a challenger's ticket by obtaining a certain amount of points by defeating various trainers scattered throughout. If you get spotted, a trainer will immediately begin battle, but something this game adds is that if you sneak attack their Pokemon before they spot you, you get an extra attack out of the gate. I loved the way they incorporated the stealth mechanics from Arceus into the trainer battles. It was so fun looking for hiding spots and quickly dodge rolling to them before anyone could see me, but also getting close enough to attack. There are also point medals everywhere, which simply grant extra points, but there are also bonus cards which have conditions such as immediately knock out unaware opponents with your first blow, or knock opponents out with a Mega Evolved Pokemon. If the conditions on the cards are met, they will grant bonus points. Once the night ends, the points are totaled and you're granted bonus money. Once you've gotten enough points, you're free to challenge the trainer you've been matched up with. At first, these trainers aren't very memorable, but as the game progresses, you'll match up with more and more interesting characters. I really like this whole system, honestly. I kinda admit I forgot to use my bonus cards a lot, but I still think that it's a really neat mechanic, which encourages players to use specific strategies and types, similar to the Pokédex missions from Legends Arceus, but now in a battling context. My favorite usage of the battle system arrives later in the game in the form of Rogue Mega Evolution battles. These battles take the concept of the boss battles from Legends Arceus and run with it. Since the battles are now real-time, there's no awkward shift from real-time dodging to turn-based combat, and it feels great now. Each Rogue Mega Evolved Pokemon have their own special and super powerful moves to dodge, and taking them on with your Mega Evolved Pokemon feels awesome. Like this Banette that creates copies of itself, or Mawile shooting like 50 light orbs at you. This is where the battle system really comes to life and can be genuinely challenging. The way Mega Evolution works in this game is a bit different to previous games. In standard battles, landing hits on opponents will cause a meter to charge up, and once it's full, you can Mega Evolve a Pokemon holding its corresponding Mega Stone. The meter will then drain over time, with the Pokemon reverting back to its usual form once it's done. As a trade-off though, this means you can potentially use Mega Evolution multiple times per battle, especially since it's no longer locked to one Pokemon per battle. During Rogue Mega Evolution battles, instead the player must collect little orbs that the Rogue Pokemon drops, which will power up the Mega Meter when collected. I vastly prefer the way Mega Evolution works in this game to previous games, since there's a lot more freedom in how you use it, with the cost of it no longer lasting the whole fight. When I got to the Rogue Mega Pokemon fights, at first I wondered if any non-Mega Pokemon would be useless, but a nice additional feature is Plus moves, which allow you to use a bit of your meter to unleash a stronger attack, with Megas being able to use Plus moves indefinitely. In terms of the challenge, while this game isn't difficult per se, outside of the final boss, which definitely gave me a rough time, this game is actually decently challenging compared to the bore fest that was Pokemon Violet, where I one-shot literally everything. Granted, this time I specifically made sure not to overlevel too much, and that, combined with the real-time battle system, just made the game so much more enjoyable. Something I like about the difficulty is there's sort of a way to customize it. No, there's no easy or hard selectable difficulty or anything, but there is a man who will exchange colorful screws for plushies that will offer boosts, such as one that makes it harder for you to black out from direct attacks, and one that increases your EXP. I deliberately didn't upgrade my EXP boost past the level 1 plushie in order to even out the level curve, and that made the game more challenging. One of my favorite things about this game, and this might be controversial, are the characters and dialogue. I find this game to be very silly in comparison to previous games, and I love that. There are some crazy, out-of-context pieces of dialogue which I found hilarious. It sort of reminded me of how random and silly the Gen 1 dialogue could be. While I stated before that I found exploration wasn't on par with previous games, I still explored a lot simply to find out what the NPCs were going to say next. It wasn't just funny moments that made me interested in the dialogue, however. See, in the story there is an organization called Quasartico Inc., which is working on an urban redevelopment plan for the whole city, hence why it's so much more high-tech than in X and Y. They are attempting to create a city where people and Pokemon can coexist in harmony, and I found it interesting to see citizens' different takes on this. Some people are hesitant or against the idea of living with Pokemon, while others are open to the idea. There's a group called the Fist of Justice that wants to help people train to be able to fight wild Pokemon that attack, so perhaps one day the Wild Zone holotech can be dropped entirely. To me, the most interesting part of the Pokemon universe is how Pokemon and humans live together, and so I love that the idea is explored a lot here. I think the main group, TMZ, is okay. They're not nearly as interesting as some of the people you meet later in the Royale, but they're fine, and honestly, I found them much more memorable than the friends from X and Y. I like Tawny and Lita fine, but Naveen was by far my favorite, which apparently is an unpopular opinion. I just love how the other characters are so positive and bubbly, but he just does not want to be here. His hatred of croissant curry is so over the top and stupid that I kinda love it, and I understand fanboying over a content creator you enjoy. Some people were saying how this teaches bad lessons to children and called him a stalker. Yeah, he's a little obsessed, but he respects parasocial boundaries. Also, yeah, not like classic Pokemon, which always had moral, upstanding role models.
Bugs are one of the 3 most disgusting things in the world! Aside from you, what are the other disgusting things?
It's later on when the characters start getting really fun. I really like the streamer Kanari. Yeah, she's pretty similar to Iono from Pokemon Scarlet and Violet in terms of aesthetics, but her personality isn't like a copy or anything. She's a lot more reserved in contrast to Iono, who is very loud and outgoing. This might also be an unpopular opinion, but I love Jacinthe, Jack in the Box, Jacinthe. People are like, oh, she's annoying, but A, she slays, and B, I love the really chaotic energy she brings to the game. She's unhinged, and she's gonna do whatever she has to in order to get her way. I guess I should talk about the game's visuals. They're okay. To be fair, they're a vast improvement over Scarlet and Violet, and I do at least think the game has a nice enough aesthetic. But I feel like even in the Switch 2 version, the game could be kinda blurry looking, especially when playing in handheld mode. A big criticism levied towards this game was the fact that the doors and walls are all flat textures instead of being fully 3D. I personally didn't mind it too much, as I imagine they only did this to make the experience more smooth for Switch 1 users, though it definitely does look a bit weird. The shadows on objects can look very strange as the lighting changes throughout the day, and certain details will pop into view as you get closer. But something very annoying about the animation are these stupid fist bumps. See, when characters fist bump in this game, they don't fist bump like normal people. They sort of just hold their fist in front of the other person's. It's so odd. I looked up if French people fist bump differently or something, but no, it's just this really strange animation that makes me cringe every time I see it. I know this sounds like a nitpick, but it happens a lot throughout the game, and what's even stranger is that they have your starter fist bump you, and it looks completely natural because the bump actually connects, and they even add a little visual effect to give a sense of impact, which really just makes me wonder why they animated the fist bumps the way they did. Anyway, enough about the fist bumping. Let's talk about elements of the visual design I actually liked. The UI looks fantastic. It's super futuristic looking and sleek. Also, Lita's dancing animation. Incredible. For real though, I think the character animations are so much more expressive and full of personality than in previous games. Similar to Legends Arceus, I actually like the way move animations look in this game. Yeah, they're not that much more advanced than the way they look in, say, Scarlet and Violet, but it's just that here, I don't know, physical moves actually connect, and that combined with the explosive defeat animations when battling trainers makes battles feel more satisfying. The Rogue Mega Evolutions have certain moves that really make the Pokemon feel like they're overflowing with power. I feel the battle visuals, especially when combined with the sound design, really have a sense of impact and weight that the turn-based games don't have as much of. I think the main frustrating visual element for a lot of people is the animation of the Pokemon themselves. If you ever played Pokemon Stadium for the Nintendo 64, the animations in that game are genuinely full of so much personality. Hell, any of the old battle simulator games like Pokemon Colosseum, Gale of Darkness, or Battle Revolution all had fantastic animations. I understand that there are way more Pokemon now per game, even discounting the cuts to the national decks. Plus, these aren't battle simulators, but full-fledged games, but that doesn't change the fact that these animations from what is now a multi-billion-dollar franchise look worse than a game on a system where they could barely render spheres. If there's one visual element here that far and away beats previous games, it's the character customization. Pokemon X and Y were the first games in the series to feature it, so it only makes sense that its successor would heavily expand upon it. You can customize pretty much any type of clothing on your character, from headwear to shoes, to gloves and earrings. You can also customize elements of your face, like color contacts and eyelashes. You can also customize your hair with different styles, including adding an extra color to your hair, which is what I did for most of the game. Outside of meme making, I'm not usually a huge character customizer, but in this game it was fun, I really enjoyed it. I'm sure this is a given, but the game's performance is basically flawless on Switch 2, with a smooth, consistent 60 frames per second. I've played bits of the Switch 1 version, and in contrast to Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, whose frame rate was about as smooth as a cloister, from the little I played of ZA on Switch 1, the game seems to run at a pretty consistent 30 FPS. My girlfriend let me try a Rogue Mega Banette battle on her Switch 1, and it seemed to run just fine. And that seems to be the consensus I've heard online, so Switch 1 users shouldn't have to worry about suffering through a terrible frame rate throughout the whole game. The load times are also slightly longer on Switch 1, they're not bad, I just felt I should note that. The online works shockingly well too, at least on Switch 2. I didn't have any issues from the bits that I played. Even though I honestly sucked at it, the online was still pretty fun. Basically, it's a free-for-all where you try to knock out the most amount of opponents' Pokemon. I know some people were really frustrated with some of the Mega Stones being locked behind online, and yeah, that is stupid, but at the very least, if you do have online, the stones are incredibly quick and easy to unlock. The sound design and music are decent in this game. The sound of catching a Pokemon is really satisfying, just as it should be. The menu sounds also have a really nice electronic sound to them, as Pokemon has always had in my opinion. And of course, the music is nice as always. I think if there's one thing that unites Pokemon fans together, it probably is the music. Personally, I think Legends Arceus and Scarlet and Violet had better soundtracks, but this one is still nice with really relaxing music. I do wish there was a little more variation with the day and night tracks, but they were pleasant enough to not get too annoying even after hearing them so much. The battle themes can be pretty banging, especially one and you all know what it is. One aspect of the sound direction that has been heavily criticized in the past few years is the lack of voice acting. To be fair, the game technically does have voice acting, but it's only for character grunts. Personally, I don't mind too much normally. I'm fine with the game just being text, but where the lack of voice acting hurts the game are during specific cutscenes that are animated as if there is supposed to be voice acting. These scenes feel really awkward without any voices coming out of the characters' fully animated mouths. As the plot progresses, the game starts bringing elements from X and Y back. I won't spoil them here, but I really like how they brought back that game's story in a new and interesting way, and it all culminates with an insane, over-the-top anime-esque climax that has a surprising amount of spectacle to it all, and a really emotional moment that was a nice conclusion to the story of Kalos. If you play this game, I actually recommend playing Pokemon X and Y first if possible, since this game does act as a sort of sequel to that one. But the game does catch you up to speed regardless. Now, as for the million-dollar question, is this game worth buying? Well, okay, first let's answer the question of, is it worth $70 goddamn? In terms of quality, no, not at all. But in terms of the time you'll get out of it, you'll probably spend a decent amount of time on this game if you're a Pokemon fan. Hell, my girlfriend got her Pokemon up to level 100, so I at least know she enjoyed the game. As mentioned before, shiny hunting is easier here, so that will probably add even more longevity for a lot of people. I understand why a lot of people don't like this game. Ever since the mainline Pokemon games began to release on Switch, the games have just continued to not reach the quality of other Nintendo series. People are getting tired of these games being rushed out every single year, but it's hard because we all still keep buying them because whether we like to or not, we love this series. There is also the issue of the DLC being $30 extra, which I'll be honest, I did not bother paying. This did not look like it was worth that price. I can buy Gex for that price, and you expect me to pay for Distortion, World Lumiose, and Donuts? If you like Pokemon for the exploration, this probably isn't going to be the game for you. But if you think the real-time battle system seems fun, then you'll probably get some decent mileage out of this game. Pokemon Legends EA is not a super high quality game, but it is a fun one. If you are a Pokemon fan, you'll probably at least get some enjoyment out of it. For me personally, I felt the core battling and catching mechanics were super fun, and I really enjoyed some of the themes the game explored. And while I was gifted this game by my mom for Christmas, thank you mom, sorry for criticizing this game you spent $70 on, I probably still would have bought it even if I hadn't received it. So, it's a game with a lot of flaws, but I also had a lot of fun. Also, I don't care what you say, Mega Starmie is amazing.